She expected to work as a servant. The rancher corrected her. "You're my wife, not my employee."
Maria grew up in a small, quiet town where life moved slowly and everyone knew each other. She was the kind of girl who liked to wake up early, hear the birds singing, and watch the sun rise over the fields.
Her family owned a small house with a tiny garden, and they lived a simple life. Her father worked in the fields, tending to vegetables and taking care of a few chickens, while her mother stayed at home, cooking, cleaning, and making sure the house was always warm and welcoming. Maria had two younger brothers, and from a very early age, she had learned to take responsibility for herself and help her parents. She would wake up every morning, sweep the house, make breakfast for the family, and then help her mother in the garden. She had never minded these tasks. In fact, she liked to be busy. It gave her a sense of purpose, a feeling that she was helping her family survive and thrive. Despite all her work at home, Maria loved learning. She went to the small school in her town and was always curious about the world beyond her little neighborhood. She loved reading books about people from different places, imagining the lives they lived, and dreaming that one day she too would see the world. But the truth was, she didn't know much about what her future would look like. She assumed that when she grew up she would get married, move into a husband's house, and continue to work as she had all her life. She imagined herself cooking, cleaning, taking care of the home, and making her husband happy. To her, that seemed like the natural way of life because that's what she had seen all around her. She had grown up thinking that love and marriage meant responsibility, not luxury. When Maria was 19, she met Daniel. He was a rancher who lived a few miles outside town. Daniel was quiet, with a calm presence that made people feel at ease. He was older than Maria by several years, but there was something kind and steady about him that drew her in. He wasn't flashy or rich in the way the city people were. His wealth wasn't in cars or jewelry. It was in his land, his animals, and his skills as a rancher. He worked hard every day, tending to cattle, repairing fences, and making sure everything on the ranch ran smoothly. People in the town respected him, not because he showed off, but because he was reliable, honest, and genuinely cared about those around him. Maria first noticed Daniel when she was helping her mother sell vegetables at the local market. Daniel came to buy some fresh produce, and he smiled at her politely. They talked briefly about the quality of the tomatoes and cucumbers, but even in that short conversation, Maria felt a strange connection. He asked about her family, about the garden, about her dreams, and listened carefully. Most people she met didn't seem to care much beyond their own business. But Daniel listened. He asked questions and remembered her answers. That small act of kindness made Maria curious about him, and she began to think about him more often. Over the next few months, Daniel would occasionally visit the market. Each time they talked a little longer, laughed a little more, and shared stories of their lives. Maria learned that Daniel had grown up on a ranch just like his parents, that he loved animals, and that he had a deep respect for nature. She admired his work ethic, his patience, and the gentle way he treated people. He never demanded attention or praise. He simply lived quietly and honestly. Slowly, Maria began to imagine a life where she could be part of that world. One evening, Daniel invited Maria to visit the ranch. She felt nervous and excited. The ranch was much bigger than she had imagined, with open fields, grazing cattle, and a small, cozy house where Daniel lived. Maria helped him with small chores, but Daniel didn't expect her to do everything. He showed her the fields, introduced her to the animals, and told her stories about the land. Maria was amazed at how much work went into keeping a ranch running. It was tiring, yes, but it was also beautiful. She could see the sunrise over the fields and hear the soft lowing of the cows, and she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. During that visit, Daniel asked her about her dreams. Maria admitted that she wasn't sure what her life should look like. She assumed she would work hard, take care of her home, and live quietly. Daniel listened without judgment. Then, for the first time, he said something that made Maria pause. He told her that marriage wasn't about work or chores, that it was about partnership, respect, and love. He said he wanted a wife, not a servant, someone who would share her life with him, not someone who would simply follow orders. Maria had never heard these words before. In her mind, marriage had always been about responsibility, about keeping the household running smoothly. She had never imagined that someone would see her as more than that, as a partner, an equal, a friend, and a companion. Maria felt a mixture of confusion and hope. She didn't know what it meant to be treated this way, but she felt drawn to the idea. She liked Daniel, respected him, and now wondered if she could imagine a life where she wasn't constantly working just to meet expectations. For the first time, she thought about what it would mean to have someone in her life who valued her for who she was, not just what she could do. As weeks passed, Maria and Daniel grew closer. They spent evenings talking, walking through the fields and sharing meals. Maria began to see a different kind of life, one where she could rest, laugh, and enjoy small moments without feeling guilty. She still helped with chores sometimes, but it was out of choice, not obligation. She began to imagine a future where marriage could be more than duty, more than hard work. It could be a source of comfort, friendship, and joy. When Daniel proposed, Maria felt a surge of emotions. She was nervous, excited, and a little scared. But she knew she wanted to spend her life with him. She realized that marriage with Daniel wouldn't be what she had always expected. But maybe that was a good thing. Maybe it was better. She could be herself, loved and respected, without being treated as a servant. The idea was both new and thrilling, and she felt a quiet confidence growing inside her. The wedding day was simple, filled with close family, friends, and the beauty of the open fields. Maria wore a modest dress, and Daniel's eyes never left her. She felt a strange but comforting sense of belonging, as if she had found a place where she truly mattered. That night, as they watched the stars above the ranch, Daniel took her hand and said again, "You are my wife, not my employee. We will share this life together." Maria smiled, feeling the weight of years of expectation lift off her shoulders. For the first time, she understood that love could be different from what she had always imagined: gentle, kind, and full of respect. Maria's life was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine. She still had much to learn about ranch life, about marriage, and about herself. But in that moment she felt hope, excitement, and a quiet joy that made her heart feel light. She had stepped into a new world, one that promised challenges, but also the kind of partnership she had always secretly dreamed of. And though she did not know what the future held, she was ready to embrace it, hand in hand with Daniel, her husband and her equal. Maria woke up on her first morning at the ranch with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The air smelled different here, fresh, clean, and full of the scent of grass and soil. She could hear the faint lowing of the cows and the soft rustle of leaves in the gentle morning breeze. Everything was new, and it all felt a little overwhelming. The house was larger than the small home she had grown up in, with wide windows that let in sunlight and a kitchen that gleamed with polished wood. She felt a sudden wave of responsibility wash over her. She had always helped her family with chores, and now she assumed that her life on the ranch would be no different. She imagined long days spent cooking, cleaning, tending the animals, and making sure Daniel had everything he needed. Daniel noticed her hesitance but did not scold her. Instead, he gave her a warm smile as he poured coffee for both of them. "Good morning," he said softly. "Sleep well?" Maria nodded, clutching the cup of steaming coffee. She felt nervous because she wanted to make a good impression, to show that she could handle life on the ranch. She had grown up believing that a wife's job was to serve her husband, and that idea had shaped every expectation she had about marriage. After breakfast, Maria began her day as she thought she should. She cleaned the kitchen, swept the floors, and then went outside to help feed the animals. She expected Daniel to supervise her, to give instructions, to watch her work and correct any mistakes. But to her surprise, he didn't. He was busy with his own tasks, checking fences, moving cattle, and repairing a section of the barn that had been damaged by winter storms. Occasionally, he would glance at her and offer a small nod of approval, but he never told her what to do or expected her to keep up with him. By midday, Maria was exhausted. Her arms ached from lifting hay, her back felt sore from bending and sweeping, and her mind spun with worry that she was not doing enough. She felt that she had failed somehow, that she was not living up to the standards of what a good wife should be. She paused for a moment, leaning against the barn wall and sighed. Daniel noticed and walked over. "Maria," he said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do all this. You're my wife, not my employee. You don't have to serve me. We are partners, remember?" Maria froze. His words echoed in her mind almost like a sound she had never heard before. She had expected to work tirelessly, to keep the household running perfectly, and to make Daniel's life easier through her labor. She had believed that a wife's role was to serve her husband, just as she had seen in her family and in the world around her. But Daniel's words suggested something entirely different, something she had never considered. I thought this is what a wife should do," Maria admitted, her voice soft tinged with uncertainty. Daniel shook his head and smiled kindly. "No, Maria. A wife is not someone who serves. A wife is someone who shares her life with me, someone whose happiness and well-being matter just as much as mine. You are not here to work yourself to exhaustion. You are here because I love you, because I want to share my life with you." Maria felt a mixture of confusion, relief, and even guilt. All her life she had been taught that hard work and service were the most important qualities a woman could offer in a marriage. She had expected long hours of labor, constant effort, and little rest. Now, she was learning that she had been thinking about marriage in the wrong way, that her worth was not measured by how much she could do for her husband.
Over the next few days, Maria began to observe the ranch more carefully.
She watched Daniel as he worked tirelessly, but without complaint. He treated the animals with patience and care, spoke gently to the farmhands, and always made sure to take small breaks to enjoy the beauty of the land. Maria realized that he valued balance, kindness, and thoughtfulness, not just hard work. He didn't expect her to do everything. He expected her to be part of his life, to share in both the challenges and joys. Maria tried to follow his example. She spent time learning about the ranch, understanding how the animals were cared for, how the crops were tended, and how the land itself needed attention. She helped where she could, but she no longer felt the same pressure to prove herself constantly. Instead, she discovered that her presence, her companionship, and her willingness to learn were just as important as her physical labor. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, Maria sat on the porch watching Daniel work in the fields. She felt a deep sense of admiration for him. His life was not easy. Ranching was demanding, exhausting, and full of responsibility, but he faced it with patience and calm. She realized that she wanted to support him in ways beyond chores and work. She wanted to be a partner, to share ideas, solve problems together, and celebrate small victories. For the first time, Maria understood that marriage could be about mutual respect and shared experiences, not just service. That evening, they shared a quiet dinner. Maria was still learning the rhythms of ranch life, and Daniel encouraged her to ask questions, to rest, and to enjoy herself. "There will be work," he said softly, "but we will face it together. You are not alone here, Maria. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders." Maria felt tears prick her eyes. It was overwhelming to realize that she had spent so long believing that love and marriage were about duty, and now she was discovering that they could be about care, respect, and partnership. She wanted to tell Daniel how grateful she was, but she realized that words could not fully capture her emotions. Instead, she simply held his hand, feeling a warmth and connection she had never known before. Over the next few weeks, Maria adjusted to life on the ranch. She learned how to ride horses, how to check the health of the cattle, and how to manage small household tasks without feeling burdened. Daniel encouraged her every step of the way, always reminding her that she was not there to serve him, but to live with him, to share her life openly and freely. Slowly, Maria began to see the beauty in this new way of living. It was hard work, yes, but it was balanced with love, care, and companionship. One day, as they repaired a fence together, Maria realized how much she had grown in just a short time. She had expected to feel overwhelmed and exhausted, constantly striving to meet imagined expectations. Instead, she felt capable, confident, and valued not for what she could do, but for who she was. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. "You are my wife, not my employee." They were no longer just words. They had become a guiding principle for her new life. By the end of her first month on the ranch, Maria had begun to truly feel at home. She still had moments of doubt, moments when she thought about her old life and the expectations she had grown up with. But she was learning that love and partnership could be gentle, supportive, and even joyful. She was discovering a new kind of freedom, a freedom not from work, but from the idea that her worth depended on labor alone. Maria often reflected on how different life was from what she had imagined. She had expected long, tiring days of chores, of service, and of constant effort to please her husband. Instead, she found herself learning, growing, and sharing life with someone who respected and valued her. It was a lesson she would never forget. That marriage was not about serving someone else, but about sharing life, supporting each other, and building a home together. As she lay in bed each night, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch, Maria felt a deep sense of peace. The life she had expected to live was not the life she was living, but it was far better than anything she could have imagined. She realized that sometimes expectations can limit happiness, and that the true joy of life comes from embracing new perspectives, learning to trust, and accepting love in its purest form. Maria's life on the ranch had begun to settle into a rhythm, but that rhythm was not always easy. Every day brought new challenges that tested her strength, patience, and confidence. She had hoped that moving to the ranch would be simple, that she would quickly learn the routines, help Daniel where needed, and gradually feel at home. But reality was very different. Life on a ranch was demanding, unpredictable, and often exhausting, and Maria soon realized that her old habits and expectations were not enough to prepare her. Even though Daniel had told her she was not there to serve him, Maria could not shake the feeling that she needed to do more. Every time she saw a chore that needed doing, a pile of hay to move, a floor to sweep, or dishes to wash, she felt a wave of guilt if she did not do it immediately. In her family, hard work had always been a sign of love, and she carried that belief with her. She wanted to show Daniel that she could handle ranch life, that she was strong, capable, and responsible. But the harder she worked, the more exhausted she felt, and the more she questioned herself. One morning, Maria woke up before sunrise, determined to get a head start on chores. She fed the animals, swept the barn, and carried buckets of water to the fields. By the time Daniel appeared, she was tired and sweaty, her hands raw from work. She expected him to praise her effort or at least acknowledge her labor, but Daniel simply smiled gently and said, "Maria, take a moment to rest. You've done enough." Maria felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief because she could finally sit down and catch her breath, but frustration because she could not let go of the idea that she needed to prove herself. She had spent so many years believing that a wife's worth was measured by how much she could do, and letting go of that belief was harder than she had imagined. She wanted to follow Daniel's example, to trust his words, but every instinct inside her pushed her to keep working. As the days passed, Maria began to notice small differences between her expectations and the reality of ranch life. Tasks were physically demanding, yes, but they also required patience, observation, and learning. Daniel often asked her questions about what she noticed in the fields, how the animals were behaving, or what she thought might be done to improve their routines. At first, Maria felt nervous answering. She was used to following instructions, not giving them. But slowly she realized that Daniel valued her opinion, her observations, and her thoughts. It was not enough to work hard. It was also important to think, plan, and care in ways that went beyond physical effort. Despite these realizations, Maria struggled with moments of doubt. One afternoon, she tried to help repair a fence, but she struggled to lift the heavy wooden posts. A wave of embarrassment and self-criticism swept over her. She felt clumsy, unprepared, and inadequate. Daniel noticed immediately and came to help, lifting the post with ease and offering guidance without judgment. "Maria," he said, "it's okay. You don't have to do everything perfectly. We're learning together." His calm reassurance was comforting, but it also made her realize how harsh she had been on herself. She had expected to handle every task perfectly, to know everything instantly, and to contribute as much as Daniel did. But life was not about perfection. Life was about learning, growing, and supporting each other. That evening, Maria sat on the porch, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The fields glowed in soft orange light, and the cows moved slowly across the pastures. She thought about her old life, about the small house she had grown up in, and about the expectation she had carried with her for so many years. She realized that her struggle was not with the work itself, but with her mindset. She had been trying to fit into a role that no longer applied, one where a wife's value was measured solely by labor. Maria also began to notice the quiet challenges of ranch life that she had never imagined. The weather could be unpredictable. Storms could damage fences, crops could fail, and animals could fall sick. Daniel faced these challenges daily, but he handled them with patience and determination. Maria admired him more with each passing day, but she also felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her. She wanted to contribute, to help, and to share the burden. But she also wanted to do so in a way that honored Daniel's wishes, not out of guilt or fear. One particularly difficult day, a heavy rainstorm swept through the ranch. The fields turned to mud, the animals were restless, and a section of the fence had collapsed. Maria panicked at first, thinking she needed to fix everything immediately. Daniel called her inside and said, "Maria, we will handle this together. You don't have to solve everything at once."
At first, Maria felt frustrated.
How could she stand by and do nothing when there was so much work to do? But as she watched Daniel calmly organize the tasks, assign help where needed, and guide her gently, she began to understand. Life on the ranch was not about rushing and working endlessly. It was about planning, teamwork, and resilience. She realized that her value was not in endless labor, but in being present, learning, and supporting the people around her. As weeks turned into months, Maria experienced a mixture of growth and struggle. She still had moments of doubt, moments when she felt she was failing or not doing enough. But she also had moments of pride, when she noticed small improvements in her skills, when she successfully cared for an animal, or when she made a suggestion that Daniel appreciated. She began to understand that life on the ranch, and life in marriage, was not a test of endurance alone. It was a journey of shared effort, respect, and learning together. Maria also noticed changes within herself. She was becoming stronger, more confident, and more patient. She learned to ask for help without feeling weak, to rest without feeling guilty, and to celebrate small victories without comparing herself to Daniel's experience. She realized that her initial expectations of endless work and service had been shaped by habit and tradition, not by love or understanding. And now, through experience and Daniel's guidance, she was learning a new way of being. Despite these lessons, Maria sometimes struggled with isolation. Ranch life could be lonely, especially when the tasks of the day kept her occupied, but did not provide opportunities for social connection. She missed her family and the familiar rhythms of her small town. On these days, Daniel noticed her quiet mood and would sit with her, sharing stories of his past, listening to her thoughts, and reminding her that she was not alone. His patience and understanding helped her navigate these moments, teaching her that emotional support and companionship were as important as physical work. One afternoon, while walking through the fields, Maria admitted to Daniel, "I still feel like I should be doing more. I want to help, but sometimes I feel like I'm not enough."
Daniel smiled gently and replied, "Maria, being enough is not about how much you do."
It's about who you are, your heart, your mind, your presence. You are my partner, not my servant. That is what matters. Those words stayed with Maria. Slowly, she began to internalize them, to accept that her worth was not measured solely by effort, but by her love, care, and presence. She began to see herself as a true partner in their shared life, capable of contributing in many ways beyond physical labor. By the end of her first year on the ranch, Maria had grown tremendously. She had faced challenges, learned new skills, and confronted her own fears and doubts. She was no longer the girl who believed that marriage meant endless work and sacrifice. She had discovered a new kind of strength, one that came from partnership, understanding, and mutual respect. Maria still faced challenges. and there were still days when she felt tired or unsure, but she had learned to approach them with patience and confidence, knowing that she was not alone and that her value was not defined by endless labor. Life on the ranch was hard, yes, but it was also rewarding, full of learning, growth, and shared moments of joy. And slowly, Maria was beginning to feel that she truly belonged, not just as Daniel's wife, but as his partner in every sense of the word. The morning started like any other, with the golden sun rising over the wide fields of the ranch, birds chirping in the distance, and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze.
Maria had grown used to this peaceful rhythm, and she often took a moment to enjoy the quiet before the work of the day began.
But on this particular morning, a heavy feeling hung in the air. The sky was gray and dark clouds rolled across the horizon. The wind carried a chill that made Maria pull her jacket tightly around her. She sensed that something was coming, though she didn't yet know what. Daniel was already in the fields, checking on the cattle and making sure everything was in order. Maria grabbed a cup of coffee and went outside to join him, feeling a mixture of anticipation and unease. "The weather looks rough today," she said, trying to sound casual. Daniel nodded. "It's going to be a storm. We need to secure everything before it hits." Maria's stomach tightened. She had faced challenges before, the heavy chores, the demanding work. But this felt different. A storm could damage the fields, harm the animals, and undo weeks of careful work. She felt a surge of responsibility and fear. She wanted to do something to help, to protect the ranch, but at the same time she remembered Daniel's words. "You are my wife, not my employee. You are my partner." She realized that partnership did not mean doing everything herself. It meant supporting, planning, and taking part in the solution together. They spent the morning securing the fences, moving the animals to safer areas, and checking the barns for any weak spots. Maria worked alongside Daniel, lifting hay bales, tying knots, and learning how to move the cattle calmly without startling them. Every task required patience, skill, and careful observation. She noticed that Daniel never rushed her or criticized her mistakes. Instead, he offered guidance, encouragement, and explanations, showing her that learning together was more important than perfection. By midday, the storm had arrived. Rain poured from the sky in heavy sheets. Lightning flashed across the horizon, and strong winds rattled the barn doors. Maria felt a surge of fear as she watched the fields flood and the animals become restless. She had never seen a storm like this before, and for a moment she froze, unsure of what to do. Daniel came to her side and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Maria," he said firmly but gently, "look at me. We can do this together. Stay calm, stay focused, and remember what we practiced." His confidence gave her courage. She took a deep breath and began helping him organize the animals, move them to shelter, and secure the barn doors. The work was exhausting, but Maria felt a strange sense of strength she had never known before. She realized that she was not just helping physically. She was thinking ahead, anticipating problems, and making decisions alongside Daniel. Her contributions mattered, and Daniel acknowledged them with a nod or a word of praise. Hours passed, and the storm raged on. Maria's clothes were soaked, her hands raw, and her muscles ached from the constant effort. But she did not stop. She was determined to face this challenge not as a servant doing chores, but as a partner standing beside her husband. She remembered all the lessons she had learned since arriving at the ranch, the importance of patience, observation, teamwork, and emotional strength. Every decision she made, every task she completed, was part of a larger effort to protect the ranch and the life they were building together. At one point, a tree branch broke under the force of the wind and fell near the barn, threatening to block the gate. Daniel called out, "Maria, help me move this before it traps the cattle." Without hesitation, Maria ran to his side. Together, they lifted the branch and cleared the path, working as a team. For the first time, Maria truly felt the meaning of partnership. Draven just helping? She was not just helping. She was actively contributing, making a difference, and taking responsibility. As the storm began to subside, the rain slowing to a drizzle and the wind losing its force, Maria and Daniel surveyed the ranch. Some damage had occurred, the fences were bent, the ground was muddy, and a few plants were flattened, but the animals were safe, and the barns had held. Maria felt a rush of relief and pride. They had faced the storm together, and they had survived. Later that evening, as they sat by the fireplace in the warm glow of the room, Maria finally allowed herself to relax. She was exhausted, but her exhaustion was different now. It was not the tiredness of overworking herself to meet impossible expectations. It was the satisfaction of having faced a challenge and contributed meaningfully. Daniel handed her a cup of hot tea and smiled. "You did wonderfully today, Maria," he said. "You stayed calm, worked carefully, and made decisions that helped keep everything safe. I am proud of you." Maria felt tears welling in her eyes. This storm, this challenge, had changed her. She no longer doubted her abilities or her place on the ranch. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and exhaustion, and she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more aware of her own value. Daniel's words were not just praise, they were affirmation that she had grown, that she was truly his partner in every sense of the word. Over the next few weeks, Maria continued to take on more responsibilities around the ranch. She learned to anticipate problems, make decisions when necessary, and care for the animals and land with growing confidence. Daniel encouraged her at every step, providing guidance but never taking over, allowing her to develop her own skills and judgment. Maria began to see herself not as someone who had to serve, but as someone who could contribute meaningfully to every aspect of their life together. Maria also began to notice changes in her relationship with Daniel. The storm had been a turning point, a shared challenge that deepened their bond. They laughed more, worked together more seamlessly, and trusted each other in ways they had not before. Maria realized that partnership was not just about sharing work, it was about sharing responsibility, trust, and emotional support. She felt a new sense of closeness with Daniel, one that went beyond love and friendship. It was a bond built on mutual respect and shared experience. One evening, as they walked through the fields under the soft light of the setting sun, Maria turned to Daniel and said, "I understand now. I don't have to prove myself by working all the time. I can contribute in my own way, and that's enough." Daniel smiled, taking her hand in his.
Yes, Maria.
"That is exactly right. Your presence, your thoughts, your care, they all matter just as much as work. We face life together, and that is what makes us strong." Maria felt a deep sense of peace. She realized that her growth was not just about learning ranch work, it was about learning herself. She had learned patience, resilience, confidence, and the true meaning of partnership. She understood that her value was not measured by labor alone, but by love, care, presence, and shared responsibility. She had faced a storm, both literally and figuratively, and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the challenges and joys of life alongside Daniel. By the end of Part 4, Maria had fully embraced her role as Daniel's partner. She had learned to trust herself, trust Daniel, and trust the life they were building together. She no longer feared failure or overwork. She understood that partnership meant facing challenges together, supporting each other, and valuing one another for who they were. The storm had been a test, and she had passed it, not through sheer effort alone, but through courage, wisdom, and love. As the sun set over the ranch, casting a warm glow across the fields, Maria felt a quiet sense of triumph. She was no longer the girl who had expected marriage to be about service and endless work. She was a strong, capable, valued partner, ready to face whatever challenges life might bring. And beside her, Daniel walked with the same quiet confidence, his hand in hers, knowing that together they could overcome anything. The weeks after the storm passed slowly but peacefully. The ranch, which had been tested and almost overwhelmed by nature's fury, had survived thanks to careful planning, hard work, and Maria's newfound confidence. She looked around one morning, walking across the muddy but repaired fields, and felt a sense of pride she had never known before. The fences were strong, the animals safe, and the crops slowly recovering from the heavy rain. Everything was not perfect, but it was alive, cared for, and moving forward. And for Maria, that felt like a victory. Maria had changed in ways she did not fully understand at first. She no longer measured her value by the hours of work she put in or the chores she completed. Instead, she understood that her presence, her decisions, and her companionship mattered just as much as any labor. She had learned to balance effort with observation, care with patience, and work with rest. She now realized that life on the ranch and life with Daniel was not about exhausting herself to meet someone else's expectations. It was about living together, supporting one another, and creating something meaningful as a team. Daniel noticed the changes in her as well. He smiled often at her growing confidence, watched as she began to make decisions about the ranch, and encouraged her to take responsibility in ways that mattered. One morning, he asked her to plan the feeding schedule for the cattle while he focused on repairing the fence. Maria hesitated for a moment, remembering her old doubts, but then she accepted the challenge. She walked across the fields, checked each animal carefully, and created a plan that was efficient and thoughtful. When she finished, Daniel reviewed it and nodded with approval. "This is excellent, Maria. You are learning so quickly, and I trust your judgment." Maria felt a surge of pride, not from praise alone, but from the realization that she could contribute in a meaningful way. She was no longer an observer or helper. She was an active participant in the life of the ranch and in the partnership she shared with Daniel. That understanding gave her a new sense of purpose and belonging. Over the following months, Maria continued to grow. She learned how to mend fences, feed and care for the animals, manage the household, and even plan small improvements to the ranch that made life easier and more organized. But perhaps the most important change was not the skills she gained, but the confidence she developed. She no longer questioned whether she belonged on the ranch or in Daniel's life. She understood that her worth was not measured by endless effort, but by the love, care, and presence she brought to every task, every decision, and every moment. Maria's relationship with Daniel deepened in ways she had never anticipated. They laughed more freely together, shared small victories, and discussed plans for the future as equals. The respect and trust between them grew stronger each day. Maria realized that partnership was not just about dividing chores or responsibilities. It was about valuing each other's opinions, supporting one another through challenges, and celebrating successes together. The life they were building was not easy, but it was full of love, learning, and mutual respect. One afternoon, as they rested by the porch after a long day in the fields, Maria reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the early days when she had assumed that marriage meant endless work, when she had felt guilty for resting, and when she had questioned her own abilities. She thought about the storm that had tested them both, and about the lessons she had learned through struggle and guidance. She realized that those challenges had been necessary. They had shown her her own strength, her capacity to adapt, and her value as a partner. Maria also thought about the community in which she had grown up. She remembered her family, her friends, and the small town that had shaped her beliefs about work, marriage, and responsibility. She realized that her expectations had been formed by habit and tradition, not by love or understanding. Now, she had the opportunity to live differently, to redefine what marriage and partnership meant, not just for herself but for those who watched and learned from her. Daniel watched her quietly, noticing her thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. Maria smiled, feeling the warmth of his presence beside her. "I'm thinking about how much I've grown, how different life is from what I expected, and how grateful I am that I get to share it with you. I used to believe marriage meant endless work and sacrifice. Now I see that it's about partnership, respect, and love." Daniel nodded, squeezing her hand. "That is exactly right, Maria. You have learned so much, and you have grown in ways I always hoped you would. You are my partner in every sense, and I am proud of you." The words filled Maria with a quiet joy. She had faced doubts, fears, and challenges, and she had come through stronger, wiser, and more confident. She realized that the journey had not been easy, but it had been necessary. Every moment of struggle, every mistake, and every lesson had shaped her into the person she was now, a true partner, capable of facing life's challenges with courage and grace. As the seasons changed, Maria and Daniel continued to work together to maintain the ranch. Spring brought new life, with calves being born, crops beginning to grow, and the land awakening from winter. Maria found joy in small moments, watching a calf take its first steps, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, and sharing quiet conversations with Daniel as they planned for the future. She had learned to see beauty in both work and rest, in effort and in patience, and in the simple pleasures of life on the ranch. Maria also began to think about her future in ways she had never considered before. She realized that she could pursue her own interests, learn new skills, and make decisions that mattered to her, without feeling guilty or selfish. Daniel supported her in every endeavor, encouraging her to grow as an individual while also sharing life together. Maria felt a sense of freedom and fulfillment that she had never imagined possible, and she knew that this balance of partnership, respect, and love was the foundation for a lasting, meaningful life. Over time, their story became an example to others in the community. People admired how Maria and Daniel worked together, how they faced challenges, and how they respected and valued one another. Maria realized that she could inspire others, not through perfection or endless effort, but through authenticity, partnership, and shared growth. She felt proud, not for recognition, but for the knowledge that she was living a life grounded in love, respect, and understanding. One evening, as they sat by the fire after a long day, Maria turned to Daniel and said, "I finally understand what you meant when you said I'm your wife, not your employee. I see now that marriage is about sharing life, not just doing work. And I feel grateful every day that I get to share mine with you." Daniel smiled warmly.
I'm grateful too, Maria.
We have built something strong together, something that will last because it is rooted in respect, trust, and love. We face challenges, and we face them together. That is what makes us strong. Maria felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, uncertainties, and hard work, but now she faced them with confidence, resilience, and the knowledge that she was not alone. She had learned to trust herself, to trust Daniel, and to embrace life fully, knowing that her worth was not measured by labor alone, but by love, presence, and partnership. As the fire crackled and the stars appeared above the ranch, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had arrived expecting a life of service, of endless work and duty. Instead, she had discovered partnership, equality, and respect. She had faced storms, both literal and metaphorical, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. She realized that the most valuable lessons in life often come through challenge, patience, and trust. Maria looked over at Daniel, who was quietly tending to the fire, and smiled. She felt a sense of gratitude and fulfillment that words could not fully capture. She had found love, yes, but she had also found herself. She had learned that her value was not in labor alone, but in her heart, her mind, and her presence. She had discovered that marriage could be a source of strength, joy, and partnership, and that a true bond was built on trust, respect, and shared life. By the time the night fully settled, Maria felt a quiet sense of triumph. She had grown, she had learned, and she had found her place. The journey was far from over, and life on the ranch would continue to bring challenges and surprises. But she was ready. She was ready not just to survive, but to thrive alongside the man she loved, as his equal, his partner, and his wife. And in that moment, as the fire burned low and the stars shone brightly above, Maria knew that she had truly arrived, not as a servant, not as a helper, but as a strong, confident, and cherished partner, capable of facing the future with courage, love, and joy.